Welcome to our first ever monthly Mindset Masterclass. My name is Jackie Mott, and I'll tell you a little bit about myself in just a moment. But I just wanted to thank you so much for joining us for this call. We've got a very small group tonight, and that's okay. That's okay. We're on Canadian Thanksgiving this weekend. And if you're not with us live, then you may well get the recording. If you registered for the call, you will get the recording of this class in your email in the next day or two, as soon as we can get it uploaded and processed and all of that kind of weird technical stuff that I don't understand terribly well. So again, my name is Jackie Mott. I am a mindset and empowerment expert. And tonight our class is going to be called, What Do You Tell Yourself When You're Not Listening? Interesting question, right? So this question actually came to me, I'm going to say somewhere around 7 or 8 years ago. And when that question popped up in my world, I was going through some stuff. So we've had, and I'll share some of my story with you as we go through the class tonight, but we had lost my sister. And we lost my sister very suddenly. It was a car accident. It was one of those things where, it really jars you because it's such a sudden thing and there's no opportunity to prepare, for lack of a better way of saying that. And it really threw me for a loop. That's in truth exactly what happened. So it threw me for a loop, and it caused me to really re-examine my life and really dig deep on what was happening in my life, what was making me happy, what was bringing me joy, what was going on. And as I went through that process, what I realized was that I really wasn't happy. I really wasn't happy. So the backstory on this is basically this. I became a mom when I was 17 years old. This was a very sudden and unexpected thing for me and for, everybody who knew me, because I was one of those, those good girls, the good girls, the ones that do well in school. I was volunteer in my community. I even learned sign language just because I thought it was kind of cool. And I wanted to be able to help people in my community. So I took a class after school and I learned how to use sign language. And then I volunteered in a grade 2 class at our local deaf school, working with 2 young girls in my community. And there was a deaf young man that was in our group in the church. So every time I went to church for whatever it was, Sunday school, some sort of a youth thing, whatever it was, he was attached at my hip because I was his communication with the outside world. So that was who Jackie was. I was, sort of funny and quirky and a little bit weird and smart and caring and, ambitious and all of those kinds of things. And right up until that moment when I announced that I was pregnant, everybody thought that I had this big, beautiful, bright future. And I did. The problem is that when that announcement was made, it wasn't really good news at the time, which makes sense. I mean, let's be fair. 17 years old, no job, no spouse, no money, no education, right? It wasn't exactly the best news in the world. But at any rate, what happened was that I bought into these ideas that were sort of thrown at me that I'd ruined my life, that there was no redemption. There was nothing that I could do to come back from this thing. And I bought into those ideas. And that's the thing that we work with. So my specialty as a mindset and empowerment expert, I teach something that I call subliminal soundtrack. That is the entire format that I work with. So really quickly, subliminal soundtrack is this loop of messages that plays in the back of our minds all day, every day. It's made up of little bits of information that we've gathered over the course of our lives. So every conversation you've had, every relationship you've been part of, every lesson you've learned, every single experience has given you little bits of information that you've stored back there on your subliminal soundtrack. And we use that information to create our belief systems about ourselves, about what's possible, about everything in the world. So 2 really interesting things about this thing that I call subliminal soundtrack. The first is what we believe to be true will be true for us, even if it's based on completely incorrect information. Fascinating, right? So have you ever seen where 2 people are standing right beside each other and something happens and each of them has a completely different story? Have you ever seen that? Or, we see it all the time on Facebook and other social media these days, where two people see the exact same post with the exact same picture, the exact same words, and one person thinks it's hilarious, the other person is completely offended, right? That is what I'm talking about. Their subliminal soundtrack has caused them to have a belief about something, whatever that thing may be, that this thing is either really funny or really offensive, and they react accordingly. So the other thing is that we create our circumstances to support the belief systems that we carry. So what does it mean to love or be loved? What does it mean to be successful or be unsuccessful? What does it mean to have money or not have money? And by the way, I'm just going to tell you, money is one of my favorite things to talk about. I absolutely love it. And we might, if we have time tonight, we might just dig into that one just a little bit, because it's so much fun for me to play with this thing. So that's the stuff that's going on back there all the time. It's important to understand that, because what happens sometimes, especially when we feel like we're stuck. Have you ever been there? If you've ever experienced that, would you please drop me a 1 in the chat box if you can? I know that one of the ladies is actually driving, but if you can, just drop me a 1 if you've ever just gotten stuck and you have no idea why. You're doing all of the right stuff. You are showing up and being who you're supposed to be. You're taking the right steps, and you just can't quite break through. And very often when that happens, it's because there's something going on back there in the back of our mind that we don't realize is there. So that's that stuff that we talk about, limiting beliefs. Do we know what limiting beliefs are? We've heard about this. Katya says, yes, she absolutely understands that. It's happened to everybody. So it's wonderful because it's a universal thing and everybody can understand this idea. So subliminal soundtrack is really where all of our belief systems live. And that, I believe, when that question, what do you tell yourself when you're not listening, dropped into my head one night as I was sitting working, just out of the blue. That is what it's talking about. What is going on back there when you're not paying attention? Because here's the beautiful thing. When we know what's going on back there, when we can catch that stuff, we can change it. So for example, I asked you the question, what does it mean to love or be loved? Now, I want to be really clear. I have absolutely no judgment, but I'm going to say that, there are some people who receive love in a way of tenderness and support and appreciation and kindness. And that's the way that they understand love. There are other people, maybe they've experienced trauma in their lives, especially when they're young children. And to them, love might look like judgment or even physical harm. Do you understand? Because that's that stuff. It's that conditioning, especially that we experience when we're very, very young. Because when we're young, number one, we're sponges, right? Our job as infants and young children is to just be a sponge and learn everything we can, isn't it? So when we're being that sponge, we also don't have a way to process sometimes these things. So when problematic or difficult situations arise, what often happens with children is that they somehow make themselves at fault or to blame for whatever's happened, because they simply don't have the understanding or the framework in order to process whatever's happening. So this is what creates that conditioning and that subliminal soundtrack. So once again, what's really cool about this is when we start to understand what's happening back there, then we can actually do something about it. So this is the stuff. So again, going back to when I was 17, I became a mom. I bought into all of these belief systems that told me that my life was over. There would be no redemption. There was no possible way that I was ever going to recover from this. And I had better get comfortable living inside the circumstances that I had created for myself. So have you ever heard that saying that, I hope you're comfortable in that bed. You made it. Now you get to lie in it. Have you ever heard that one? That's the one. So where this becomes really problematic is I held on to that belief system for probably close to 30 years. And that is where this becomes really sad, Because here's the truth. I was the same person the moment I made that announcement that I had been 5 minutes before. I was still that same bright, quirky, funny girl, right? I was still that girl who had the world by the tail, who had all of that potential. It didn't just it did not just miraculously disappear or evaporate. It was still there. Had I complicated things? Sure. Were things going to be a little bit more tricky? Was I going to have to, figure them out a little bit more? Yeah. Could I have done it? Mm-hmm. Absolutely, I could have done it. But because I bought into those ideas, I created my relationships, I created my career choices, I created all of the circumstances in my world based on that view of myself. So I'll tell you where this really changed. I live in Ontario, Canada. And by the way, if you're in Canada right now, happy Thanksgiving. And if you're not, happy Thanksgiving. We had moved away. So in Ontario, where I had lived, I had started a bookkeeping business. My son he was very young at the time. He had some trouble at school. It was getting very difficult for me to manage to carry a job at this point. And I had gone back to school. I had gotten this diploma, with business administration and accounting and a whole bunch of stuff. And I'd done really well in the course. I went out and I had a job for a couple of years and things kind of went off the rails. And I had to figure out something. So I decided that I was going to become a bookkeeper. I was going to hang out my shingle and, all of these people were going to show up on my doorstep ready to give me their money, right? No, that isn't even a little bit what happened. Not even a little bit. So I tried. It didn't work. A couple of years later, we decided we were going to move away. So we moved to another city here in Ontario, and same thing, same exact thing. I started a job, wasn't working out very well. It was necessary for me to figure something else out. So I thought, oh, okay, I'll start this business. And no, same exact thing. When it changed was when we moved to Alberta. So we moved away from Ontario and we lived there for about 5 years or something in that neighborhood. The thing that changed was that I changed, because when we got out there, we had literally packed up 2 cars, well, a van and a car, with what we could load. We had myself, my husband at the time, an almost adult son, and a great big dog named Missy. And that was all we had. We packed them up, we got on the road, and we drove thousands of miles across the country with nothing but a hotel room waiting for us on the other side. There were no jobs waiting. We didn't know anybody. We didn't have a place to live. We had a hotel room. So we lived in that little hotel room with, 2 adults, an almost grown teenager, and a big dog named Missy. We lived there for 3 months before we could figure out what we were going to do, because the housing market was kind of crazy and nobody would rent to Missy. Can you imagine? She was such a beautiful girl, but nobody would rent to Missy. So what we did was we ended up buying this little place outside of town, and we sort of got busy putting our lives together. And the most miraculous thing happened for me, because as I met people, as I got to know them, as I interacted with them, they'd say, well, where are you from? And all that sort of stuff. And I'd say, well, this is my story. And so many times people said to me, wow, you packed up 2 vehicles and drove across the country with nothing waiting for you. Are you kidding? Wow, that takes a lot of guts. Wow, that was a brave thing to do. Do you see what I'm saying? So over time, as this stuff was reflected back at me, I had no choice but to consider, well, maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe I am brave. Huh? Isn't that interesting? Maybe I am this and that. And over time, what happened was that I let that 17-year-old girl who had ruined her life go. I didn't have to be her anymore, because nobody knew who I was. Nobody knew anything except what I told them. And I became what I wanted to be. I became who I really am. So as that went on and as my confidence developed, eventually we came back home. But while we were in Alberta, I started that business again and it took off. It was wonderful. It was busy, busy, busy. There was money flowing in all the time. It was great. I got sick and we moved back to Ontario a few years later. And when I started at that time, from interestingly enough, the exact same house in the exact same city, surrounded by the exact same people, inside about 18 months, I hit capacity and I was looking for a place to rent and hiring a staff. So this is how I know. This is how I know that we create those circumstances, because as long as I bought into those ideas that I was a 17-year-old girl who had completely blown it, no redemption, there is no coming back from this. As long as I bought into those ideas, that was what I believed to be true. And that's what I created my life around. When I started to understand that I was smart and I was brave and I was funny and all of those other things, I'm very good at what I do, all of those things, then I had no choice but to start to really believe that. And when I believed that, then I created the circumstances that supported that belief system. Is everybody following me here? You guys are really quiet. So that's basically where this all came from. Now, we came back home and, we settled in and built this new business and so on and so forth. And a couple of years later, my sister was killed in a car accident. And as I said, that was sort of one of the biggest. I've got about 3 really big, I call them ground zero moments. And I had somebody say to me one time, why are you, don't use that language. That's offensive. And I said, no, that's the appropriate language, because ground zero, everybody understands. Everybody understands what that means when there is nothing left but rubble. There's nothing left but rubble, and you've got to start all over again. You've got to clear the rubble and you've got to get on with your life. And losing my sister was one of those moments. So it knocked me for a loop. It caused me to go into a place of really deep reflection. And that was where this, what do you tell yourself when you're not listening, came out. So that's 10 years ago now. So over the last 10 years, this subliminal soundtrack thing has really sort of shown itself and developed and evolved. And it's now become this thing that I talk about when I speak in front of groups or when I run classes, on my show, everywhere. This is what I talk about. So I think what I'd like to focus on, we've got about probably 20 minutes or so left of the content portion before we get into the question and answer period. So what I'd like to focus on is I'm going to sort of walk you through how we shift that subliminal soundtrack. And then at the end, I've got an invitation for you. So this is not a sales thing, but I've got an invitation for you at the end. So stick with me until the end and I will share that with you. This thing can be very, very hard to break when you don't know what you're doing. And it can be so simple. It's amazing how simple this thing actually is. Like when I first understood it, I was like, you got to be kidding me. You've got to be joking that it's that simple. But the trick is learning the steps and learning how to pull these things apart. So I'm going to say right now, just quickly, if you have not already, go to jackiemott.com. There is an article or an ebook that I wrote that's called 5 Steps to Create a Mindset Wired for Success. And it will walk you through all of these steps. It will take you through the entire process. So our first thing that we have to do is we have to identify what's happening back there. So when we identify what's happening, it's usually easiest to do if we can get really quiet. And different people do different stuff. So I'm going to give you a few things on what I do when I need to get really quiet, and then, take it and run with it. You already probably know the thing that helps you for this, but things like meditation, sometimes even going for a walk, especially a walk in nature, where you can get where it's quiet and all you hear is the birds and whatever little nature sounds are going on. Also for me, believe it or not, dishes work. Isn't it crazy? Dishes work. There's something about, I think it's like the warm water and the suds and the smells and all of that kind of stuff. And also It's a task that I don't really need to focus my attention on too much. So I can sort of let my mind go wherever I want it to go. So when we go into this place of quiet, where we can hear ourselves, because that's what we need to do, where we can hear ourselves think. Now, again, you can go into a meditation and do this, but if you're going to do that, then I'm going to ask you to be conscious of whatever is going on in your thoughts and really try to focus on this thing. Once you get your mind relaxed, pick one thing. Okay, so let's talk about money. I think I said we'd talk about money, didn't I? So let's talk about money for a second. So one of the things now, again, I have an accounting background. So to me, money makes a lot of sense, right? And if you want more on this, again, you can go and download that ebook. We're also having another class again tomorrow. So you can find me on Facebook at Jackie Mott Mindset and Empowerment Expert, or if you're on the mailing list, you'll already have a link to register for that. But the thing about money is it's not that hard. And we have all of these beliefs, we have all of these ideas about what money means, don't we? So let's just imagine for a moment that you have two people who are exactly the same. They're exactly the same. They're as smart as each other. They're as pretty as each, with whatever, handsome, whatever you want to do. The only difference between these two people is that they are born into families with different financial circumstances. So let's say person A and person B. So person A is born into a home where there's a lot of wealth. Okay, there's a lot of wealth, and therefore they go through their life sort of like this. They have pretty much everything they need whenever they need it. They probably have the ability to go to nice schools. They likely take trips with their family. And when we're talking about families, these families are going to be kind and supportive and loving families, both of them. So the only difference between them is their financial circumstances. So person A, they have the wealth. They probably have the means to go and do things that they might like to do. Maybe they want to learn to play an instrument. Maybe they want to participate in a sport, whatever it is. They've got the means to do that. They've got pretty much everything they need. And they have people around them who understand money. They have people who understand using money in order to create more, right? Because that's what wealthy people do. They use their money as a tool, don't they? So by comparison, we've now got person B. Person B grows up in a home that let's just say they're middle class. So they don't have a lot. They have enough. And maybe sometimes they struggle and they don't have enough, right? So person B doesn't have necessarily the same options for schooling. They probably don't have the same options for, activities outside of school. And again, the people that they're surrounded by as they grow up are people that have learned different lessons about money than person A's group, right? So person B's group, maybe they talk about things like what's affordable or what's too expensive or things of that nature. Where can we afford to live, right? So can you imagine? And if you're in a position where you can do so, just drop me just a yes or a one or something in the chat box. Can you understand how these two people are going to have a very different way of being with money? Can you understand that? It's not that hard to follow that, is it? You've got one person who grows up with wealth and one person who grows up without it. So that's where they start. That's where they start. Katja said yes. Oh, and Robin says yes, absolutely too. So it's easy to imagine. That's our subliminal soundtrack. All right. They've both had different conditioning that's caused them to have a different way of perceiving money. Okay. It doesn't mean that money is or isn't available to them. It means they have a different way of perceiving whether or not money is available. To one, it's always been easy. To the other, it may have been a struggle. So, like we hear these songs. What is that song? She works hard for the money. You know that song? right? There's all kinds of stuff that goes on in this world. There's movies and TV shows and all kinds of stuff that we see and hear all the time that tells us that money's hard to come by, right? But what if it's not? What if it's not? What if it's out there all over the place and you just haven't quite understood that it's available to you? One of the really great things, and this is a really good way to illustrate this thing. So I'd like you to just sort of stick with me for a second and perceive yourself looking at someone who's standing sort of on a cliff. Okay. So they're on the edge of this cliff. And on the other side of that cliff is a thing that they really want. Now, this could be anything. It could be a relationship. It could be a job. It could be finances, could be house, could be a trip, could be anything. So on the other side, they can see that thing. All right. So 17-year-old Jackie, who believes that her life is over, that she will never redeem herself and she'd better get comfortable with the circumstances she's created. She's going to stand on that edge of that cliff and she's going to look across, and she might get kind of sad because it's out of reach, right? Like, I can see it, but I can't get to it. I can see it, but I can't get to it. And she's probably going to do one of two things. She's either going to stand there and feel really sorry for herself, or she's going to allow herself to be sad for a minute and then get on with things and find something else to look at, right? But Jackie, who drove across the country with just what we could carry in 2 cars and, you know, a big dog named Missy, that Jackie standing on the edge of the cliff and going, okay, I can see it. I can see that thing. And if I can see it, I can have it. I just don't know how yet. I just don't know how yet. And that Jackie is going to get busy looking for the resources. She's going to look for the people. She's going to look for the finances. She's going to look for whatever she needs, the opportunities, whatever she needs in order to build that bridge. And she's going to get busy building. Okay. So it's important for us to understand. And these are 2 versions of me. These are 2 exact versions of me. So it's important for us to understand what's happening back there, because we have to identify the thing. And when we do this, I want to be really clear. It is almost never necessary for us to dig into this thing. It can be. We don't have to necessarily understand. We don't have to necessarily engage with the emotional stuff that may have happened. Sometimes just the awareness of, oh, that's why I think that way. Sometimes that's all that matters. So we've got to be careful not to get caught up in fault or blame, because fault and blame is really not helpful at any time, but especially not when we're working on this stuff. So that's our first thing. We need to identify what's going on. Okay. Next step is to figure out where it came from, because when we can do that, then we can really understand it deeply. So I know that belief system that would cause me to stay here and say, Matt, I can see it, but I can't have it. I can't get to it. I know where that comes from. I know exactly where that comes from. Okay. Understand where it came from, because then we can identify its source, and then we can start to challenge it. Okay. So when we challenge those belief systems, a really great one about money, really quickly, a great one about money. Have we heard this? Money is the root of all evil. This is such an easy one to break, because what would you say if I told you it is a misquote? The quote is actually that the love of money is the root of all evil. It's not that money's evil. It's the love of money. And the love of money is greed. So that makes a lot more sense, right? Because money in and of itself can't be evil. It can't be good. It can't be anything. It's just money. It's a thing. So when we understand what's going on, then we can look at that thing. And the most important part of this is to challenge that idea, whatever it may be, with something that we know to absolutely be true. So I know that the love of money is the truth, not that money. Do you see what I'm saying? Challenge it with the truth. And that helps with the breakthrough. Our next step is to create a different way of being with money. So now, okay, money is the root of all evil. No, it's not. The love of money is the root of all evil. Okay. So then what do I know about money? Well, I know that there are a lot of wealthy people out there that are very generous, right? And think about some of these people: Oprah Winfrey, J.K. Rowling, all kinds of, very famous, very wealthy people have used their resources to help other people who didn't have the same resources, right? They do it all the time. And I bet there are millions of wealthy people out there who don't want the recognition or they don't want the attention, and they just do it quietly, right? Money's a good thing to have. Money allows for us to buy that car, or take that trip, or help that person, or go back to school, or whatever it is. It's an important thing to have. It's an important thing to have at this point in our world. Now, in the masterclass that I ran on Saturday, I was talking about, chickens and shells and all kinds of different stuff, which I'm sure at some point chickens and pretty shells have probably been used as currency. So money is really just the thing that allows people to exchange things or services or whatever the case may be. It's a thing. So now we've removed that energetic charge from this thing, and we've challenged it with something that we know to be true, that is the opposite of the fact that money is evil. And then we have to start practicing. So I'm going to share with you one of my best tips. One of my best tips is what I call dancing with our demons. I know it's a little bit weird, and it works really well for me. So dancing with our demons is basically the process of understanding and catching ourselves. So if you've got a really deeply rooted issue, like with money, because we're talking about that, so we'll just stick with that theme. So if you have that really deeply ingrained back there, that money is hard to come by, that you have to work hard to get money, that money is evil, that whatever it is, that rich people are bad, whatever that is, if that is really deeply ingrained, then it can take some practice. It can take some time to really break it. So this is where dancing with our demons comes in. When we dance with our demons, there's almost always some sort of an emotional trigger. So something happens, there's an emotional trigger that takes us back to that way of being that we've been before. But the beautiful thing is that as we learn how to do this, we get quicker and quicker and quicker at catching ourselves, until we don't need to catch ourselves anymore, because we don't have that trigger anymore. So when we're dancing with the demons, basically what we're doing is we're challenging our own internal dialogue, our own subliminal soundtrack, with the thing that we know to be true. So when that message comes up that tells me that rich people are bad, and that wasn't one of mine, but it's a common one, rich people are bad, and I start to go down that little rabbit hole, and I go, whoa, hold on, no, that's not true, because Oprah Winfrey and J.K. Rowling and Ed Sheeran and John Bon Jovi, and no, I know that's not true. There's a lot of wealthy people out there that are very kind and very supportive, and they do great work to help other people. So I've now challenged it. I've now broken it down to a place where I understand that that message was not true. That message was not true. And because I now know it's not true, I can shift it into something. So then I can start to believe that wealthy people are actually good, and that having wealth is actually a good thing. Do you see what I'm saying? So we walk through that process. And again, go to jackiemott.com and you can grab your free copy of the ebook, 5 Steps to Create a Mindset Wired for Success there. And it will walk you through in much more detail. We've got a limited amount of time tonight, so I'm only able to go so deep into this thing. So that is basically our process for breaking through that subliminal soundtrack stuff and getting us into a place where we can actually start to embrace life in a completely different way. So at this point, I just want to share with you that when you embrace this different way of being, this different way of believing, this different idea about how life works, things open up for you. They just open up for you. It's amazing how this thing happens, because when we're sitting in this place of, I know, the mind is such a fascinating thing, because our mind is actually designed to protect us and to process information, right? So our mind is like a computer, and whatever we put in there is the information that it has, and that's what's available. So when something comes up, our mind goes, oh, I know what that is. I know what to do, right? The problem, the problem is that there are literally millions of people and millions of possibility out there in the world that we've never experienced. So our mind hasn't had a chance to be exposed to that information yet, right? It doesn't mean that it's not possible. It doesn't mean that it's not available to us. It just means that we haven't experienced it. So our mind doesn't know that it's possible for us. Does that make sense? Right. That's the thing that we need to focus our attention on. So shifting our beliefs is where this thing actually really takes place. So we have to dig deep into that mindset stuff. Now, I'm really conscious of time, and I know we've got somebody who's actually driving right now. So I'm going to sort of wrap it up there. What I want to share with you right now is that if you are sort of in a position where you're not really understanding this thing, or you get it, something's going on, something's going on, you're just not sure what to do with it, then I would like to invite you to have a call with me, one-on-one, complimentary, free of charge, however you want to say that. All I would like is to spend some time with you to help you with an understanding of whatever might be happening for you. This is my mission, is to get out there and help people understand this stuff. So I'd like to invite you to do that. The only thing that you have to do, I would send you to my calendar link. Unfortunately, we're having a bit of technical problems, and it went down today. So I've got to get that sorted out. So instead of that, just send me a quick email, Jackie@jackiemott.com. So it's JACKIE at JACKIEMOTT.com. Send me a quick email. Tell me that you were on the monthly Mindset Masterclass launch and that you would like to take advantage of my offer for a call. And I will get in touch with you. We'll schedule it. We'll get it all done. And then we'll get on the phone and we'll talk, or we'll get on Zoom and we'll talk, and we'll sort it out. So that, my friends, that's what I've got for you this evening. So we have Robin and is it Katya? I hope I'm saying that right. I'm going to ask these ladies to unmute. And I'm just going to ask if you have any questions at all about what we've been talking about tonight.
Thanks, Jackie. This is Robin.
Hi, Robin.
Thanks so much for sharing. It's a really great story. And I guess my biggest question is just how to get started. You know what you need to do. You find yourself in this space, because I certainly recognize when I'm in that space. And you have to be still, and you have to be quiet, and you meditate and everything that goes along with it. But getting started is the hardest part.
Well, it usually is, right? And I think that one of the reasons for that, Robin, is because we're so comfortable. So I don't mean to be crude, but I'm just going to say this. I had a teacher in one class years ago, and she talked about like a pile of poo. And she was like, we roll around in these piles of poo. And because we're comfortable, we know we don't leave. It's not pretty, but we stay there because it's comfortable. It's what we know. And that's what I was talking about with the mind. So often it's our mind trying to protect us that stops us in these processes. The only way, Robin, that I was able to do this was I had support, and, I opened myself up. I went and I took classes and workshops and trainings that sort of stretched me and stretched me and stretched me and helped me to understand that I wasn't what I had believed to myself to be. And I don't know that I necessarily would have gotten there without that guidance. You can absolutely grab that ebook and, go ahead and read through it. you can book a call with me and we can talk about whatever's going on, whatever challenges you're experiencing, because we all go through this. And this is one of the other pieces of this, is we've got to stop thinking there's something wrong with us. This is a perfectly normal part of the human condition. So I would invite you to email me at jackie@jackiemott.com and take advantage of that conversation. I would love to speak with you about that. It's not so hard once we get the hang of it, but getting the hang of it can be tricky. Does that make sense?
Yep, it
Did,
does. Thank
did
you.
it answer your question?
It did.
Wonderful. I would love to hear from you. So I mean it like from the bottom of my heart. Please reach out and we can get together on the phone or on Zoom and have a conversation. And that offer is open to anybody that's on the call or anybody who's receiving the recording of the call. Katya, do you have anything tonight, hon?
No, thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. So ladies, do you have anything else for me tonight, or are we ready to wrap up?
I do have another quick question.
Oh, please.
How could this be relayed to children? I love when you said, when you spoke about when you were 17 and just kind of the thought process that you had.
Mhm,
And, as a parent myself, I have two children.
mhm,
I watch them, I listen to them, and I see how they sometimes process things. But I feel that what you're delivering this evening could very much be useful for them.
mhm. I think that this information is probably useful for a lot of people, but I love that you're talking about starting early, because the further, hold on, the longer we hold on to this stuff, often the more deeply ingrained it becomes. So I think that you talk with them, that you listen to them, that you validate them, and also that you challenge them. And one of the really great things about us as parents starting to do some of this work to change our own belief systems that naturally start to change our circumstances, because it's a what do you call it? Like a domino effect, right? When you change the way that you are with something, that thing changes. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So as we as parents start to shift, those kids, remember I said kids are sponges. They pay attention and they are watching you. So as you start to shift and change the way that you are being with whatever those circumstances are, and I have no idea what they are, but for example, if you're somebody who believes that beauty looks a certain way and you start to shift that and start to recognize your own beauty, because we're all beautiful in our own way, right? Then those people that are around us they're going to observe the changes and they're going to start to adopt those new ways of thinking. I think that, there are ways to talk to kids about all of these things, staying out of judgment, allowing them to feel how they feel, challenging them when their thinking is really out of whack. Those are things that I would recommend for parents. And if they need help, then help them find the help that they need. There's all kinds of people out there. And one of the things I say that, people tell me I shouldn't say this out loud. I'm not right for everybody. And I know that. But there are so many people out there that are talking about similar information. And I bet there's something for whatever age group your kids are at, Robin. I bet there's somebody out there that is teaching. In fact, I've got a friend who just wrote, I can't remember what the book is called. If you email me, I will find out what that book is called. And I haven't read it myself, but I know she's talking about mindset and bullying and self-esteem and all of that kind of stuff in the book that she wrote. So those are the kinds of things I think that I would recommend when you're dealing with kids. Just make it part of normal life. Help them to see their own value, because that's the part that gets really tricky. When we start to see ourselves as unworthy or undeserving, that's when things can really go off the rails. And, unfortunately, that's what happened when I came home pregnant at 16. Things had gone completely off the rails. I had no idea what to do or where to go, and, made some bad judgment calls. That's really what I would recommend. Robin says, perfect. Thank you. You're very welcome, Robin. So again, I'm gonna call it a night, guys. We've been here for almost an hour, and I've got nothing else to share with you right now. But I will also ask you if you would like to come and join me tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Eastern. I am doing a replay of the top 3 mindset myths that block joy and abundance and how to break free. So if that appeals to you at all, there is on my Facebook page, there is a message that has a link to register for that. You are more than welcome. I would love to see you there. And I'll just say thank you so very much for your time and your attention. Get on the email list and just keep your eyes open. There's going to be all kinds of really cool stuff coming out in the next little while. Katya says, I intended it. Yes, I did see you there. Thank you, Katya. You should have the recording in your email. I think today it was sent out. So thanks again so much for your time, ladies. Thank you so much for being with me. I hope you will join me next month on the monthly Mindset Masterclass. Again, I am Jackie Mott, Mindset and Empowerment Expert. You can find me at jackiemott.com. You can also find me on Facebook at Jackie Mott, Mindset and Empowerment Expert. And you can find me Friday afternoons if you didn't know this already. I have a show that turns into a TV show that turns into a podcast. I don't know what it is, but join me on Friday afternoons, 1 p.m. live for Time to Rise and Thrive on inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. Or you can find us Saturdays. I believe it's posted on any of the big streaming, whatever that thing is where you listen to your podcasts. So you're welcome to join me there as well. So thank you again so much. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Robin, I hope that you are driving safely. And on that note, I'm going to call it a night. Have a good night, everybody.